The Rockpile Report.
Buffalo, New York is going to be the epicenter of every stargazing nerd's wet dream.
With Buffalo Bills season ticket holder, Drew Geter.
If there was ever a time to break out Skyline Chili, it's when the Bills are 5-2, right?
The Rockpile Report. The pettiest, hardest drinking Bills podcast.
To another edition of the Rockpile Report podcast. I'm your host, Bills season ticket holder Drew Geter. I know you love that line, Ryan. It's your favorite part of the whole podcast. That's my producer, Chris Kruger, riding shotgun with us tonight, Rock Sports Network, and constant infiltrator of the hashtag sports YouTube channel, Mr. Ryan Lasel, joining us tonight. We've got a lot of, in fact, I don't know, for those of you who can't see the pile of beer cans that are over here, we're starting off relatively light. We're recording our first show of the evening. Indeed. Cheers. We've got a lot of playoff stuff to get to tonight, but every time we get together, we always, because privately, a lot of our conversations are about the trajectory of the franchise financially. And we talk about what's going on with the stadium project. And we talk about things because these are the things that actually affect the longevity of the team. And so we've been itching to get together and catch up about this stuff. Tonight seemed like a perfect opportunity to do it.
Yeah, we love talking big picture because we talk about the minutia. Everybody talks about the minutia, right? So,
and I like it because it's a little more evergreen than some of the rest of the stuff we're going to record throughout the course of the evening. You know, especially the more of these I get in there. Those are the things you almost want to go by a little bit faster. Yeah. When you go, oh, Drew's had 6 beers. All right, we could probably.
You start to hear the speech struggle a little bit, and
there's after a certain point, the poignant thought, the prose, it all kind of fails me. Shocker.
Yeah, who'd have thunk?
I joke with people all the time, though. You know, it's like Shane Gillis always says. He's like, it looks real easy sitting back here slamming. They're like, oh, you're just drinking light beers. You're just drinking lagers. It looks easy. Try it. Go ahead, try it.
It all adds up.
Have 7 beers and then go see if you can pontificate.
Yeah, Ryan, do you want to play the role of Ari Shafir tonight? We can do that.
I feel like I always wind up playing that role anyway.
So you and I have been talking about this stuff literally since COVID started. You know, we got together talking about the NFL financing and how the Bills kind of set up financially played into their expected longevity, how the NFL as a whole was probably best positioned out of any sports league in the entire world to survive the effects of COVID. And that's borne out. And just, I think we really got into a groove of getting together and having these conversations about the stadium and about the financing and everything else. So I thought it would be good to have this conversation here in this kind of format, just to give an update and our takes and our opinions on what's going on with the stadium project, the PSL sales, and the fact that Terry Pagula is selling out faster than PSL. Yeah. I want to start with stadium progress because that's the thing everyone cares about.
Yep.
The average fan doesn't care about the financial details going on in the background. They want to know about where am I with this giant building that we've fought about online. We've argued with people about dome, no dome, that we've fought about whether the public should be paying for or not, whether or not we can actually control that. Where we tailgate, Chris, 4180 Abbott Road, Orchard Park, New York. Dock slot is literally on the doorstep of the stadium construction site. And so over the course of this season, one of the coolest things has been getting to watch week over week from September into October, and then as winter kind of rolled around, the amount of consistent progress made in just the development of the structure itself. Now, have you gotten to see it up close?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I park in 4 when I come to the game, so that's right next to, it's actually going away next year. Lot 4 is going to go away, so it's going to be even more limited stadium parking, but it's right in the shadow of the stadium. So, and
it's cool to watch that thing get erected.
Oh yeah,
like this. Like it's almost like, so when I was younger, I used to do pole barns. I did a short stint as a guy who builds pole barns. And one of the most deflating things I ever saw was we'd be building a structure and you're driving out there in the work truck every day, back and forth past various job sites out in East Otto near Ellicaville. And the Amish would also be out there working. And so you'd know where you started in comparison with one of their crews. And you'd then drive past their job site every day and realize that they're miles ahead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And every day the gap is just getting wider. It's like, I don't understand. Well, first of all, there's no OSHA out there. There's no OSHA. But also, it was cool in a way to get to watch that structure just come up so quickly. And I feel like that's the way that is with the stadium. I mean, Chris, they've almost completely got the entire top rim and the framework of this state of the art roof thing that they're putting on it.
But it's still a complete shit show with the inside of it.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not, the outside looks great, but you wonder what the inside is going to look like. And
so Chris knows a guy who might know a guy who could probably get us some updates here over the next couple months as we kind of get into 2025. What I find most interesting is that they still keep pounding the table saying that they're still on track for a June 2026 opening.
Yeah.
And so with that, I'm not surprised to hear that the cost overruns have been pretty astronomical.
Yeah. It's tough to stay in a modern project plan, and regardless of what you're doing, it's IT or construction or whatever, it's expensive to stay on track.
Oh, 100%.
It really is. If you can't move that target deadline, that means that you're going to have to pay premiums to get stuff done when things inevitably fall behind, right? Things fall behind, and then the next people in line are waiting. When those items are done, you're paying a premium for them to get going on things. It's tough. And
you and I have both served as project managers in our professional lives. The moment you start any project, you're already behind.
Absolutely. Yep. You never start. Yep.
You're behind schedule the second that you start a project. And that's just the nature of it, because everything that you've worked out in your timeline, inevitably life happens. Things get pushed back, whether it's guys get sick, it's too cold, the weather doesn't cooperate. With construction, it's everything. When it's in an office setting, it's so-and-so didn't show up today. Or it's, this person had another conflicting project that takes priority. So now your thing gets pushed back by 3 weeks. Well, that 3 weeks was critical to another timeline you needed to meet. These things happen. And so inevitably in a project this kind of overwhelming, it's inevitable that this was going to happen. The problem with that is that with all of those extensions of time and all the hurdles that you're getting, if you're not willing to extend your timeline, you have to extend your budget. Now, it was originally slated to cost $1.35 billion to build this thing. Good old-fashioned inflation, project scheduling. This thing, Chris, could end up being about $2.1 billion by the time it's all said and done, which is about I think they said it's like a 56% increase in the total cost. Now, the cost of materials, like this is something I used to do previously in my professional career. Now I just do because I'm a dork. Commodity prices. It's interesting because I was like, okay, raw materials must be pushing this thing through the roof. It's actually, steel is right now the cheapest it's been in like 3 years. Steel by the metric ton right now is cheap. The problem is, look at how much of it they've already erected. Right. Exactly. They probably bought all of that back in 2023 when they started it. And the problem is steel in 2023, like Q2, Q3, was at like a 4-year high. Yeah. And so right now the market has not done them any favors in terms of the raw materials it takes to build this thing. Also, the cost of labor. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what the cost of labor is now. And so the refusal to move back the timetable and search for more cost-effective labor options, which I think a lot of builders might do, if you had a similar project without this stated, hey, we are going to open regardless of anything on this date. I mean, you obviously have to shell out for that.
Well, yeah, because the question comes, right, like when your target date is June of 26, and you fall behind, the first question that the project manager or the folks that oversee the project managers is always going to be is what do we need to do to stay on track? And inevitably, when it comes to construction or IT, it's I need more bodies. Okay, go get more bodies. Well, what does that mean, right? Like that means that it's more guys getting paid 40, 50, 60, sometimes $100 an hour. And now they're on overtime. And now they're, it's like all of these things tend to compound, and inflation is where it is, right? Like it's not going to get better between now and June of 26.
No.
And cost of labor isn't going to get better, and you're going to continue to fall behind. You're going to continue to throw bodies at it. And that's just how this is going to have to get done. It's just by sheer will, because they don't have an option to not have this thing open for the 26-27 season.
No, they don't. And
it'll get better on January 20th.
So it was
supposed to get better as of November 6th, right? And by every account,
it's like the South Park episode. Everything's different. Like it's all going to be better now, guys.
Right? It was going to be like day one, right? It was going to be we're going to lower the price of eggs, and now it's like day one we might invade Greenland, right? Like it's not going to get better. It's just going to shift the conversation to whose fault is it, because it's not going to be.
It's funny. I've stopped watching the news altogether because I feel like every time I open up like a major news outlet website and look at the headlines, I just assume that this is the Onion. I go, oh, this isn't real.
Well, it feels like the MLB or NBA trade deadline right now, right? Like you got Trump going, we're going to take Canada, for the 51st. And now you got the Canadian prime minister out there going, well, we'll take California and Oregon in a 2-for-1 deal, right? Like it seems like they're just jockeying for these positions, and they're trying to make the money work, right? Like the NBA, because you can't hit that second.
You don't want to be in the luxury
apron,
tax
right? You can't
bracket.
hit that second apron, so you got to make the money work.
It is interesting, based on some of the figures have found that the raw material cost is actually not the driver of most of the increase. It's the labor cost. Yep. And so that's been what's driving all this inflation, which is something that you can't really account for ahead of time. So when people poke fun at the numbers going up and saying, oh, it's poor planning. No. This is what it is to have a project on a deadline. And unfortunately, labor cost is always going to be volatile.
But Drew, when you and I did when the MOU came out for, I remember doing a show with you. It was that week, right? Like it was kind of like an emergency type of call. You and I talked on this show about how big of a deal it was while everyone was caught on the numbers and how are we going to pay for this and all that. You and I were caught on like the Paculas are going to pick up the tab for these overages. You and I said at the time, there's going to be overages, right? Like this thing is not going to finish on time, on budget. And the overage is getting paid by the team or by the Pagulas individually. Like that's a huge deal. We talked about that. And now you're talking about an extra almost $1 billion that this thing's going to cost that the taxpayers aren't going to have to pick up the tab on.
And this is a thing where I almost want to do like not a victory lap, because realistically there's no winner in this. But what I want to do is to all the knee-jerk reactionists out there, every blog who feels like, hey, I've got an axe to grind with public subsidies being given to people for these sorts of endeavors, like sports stadiums. Do I agree? Probably not. I don't think that it's the best use of public funds. But also, let's not act like the government doesn't also piss away millions of dollars on things that don't benefit anybody who lives here anyway. Right. At least this is something I enjoy. With that said, I wish I could get back in a time machine and take all of this information back like a year and a half when all of the hand-wringing was going on about the public money and pointing to the concept that this is a closed end. And it's one of the few times in history that public subsidies have been granted to pay for a project like this, and it was closed ended.
Yeah.
Usually it was, here's our initial bid, and then we'll negotiate as it goes. New York State said, here's what we have, and you're on the hook for the rest. And the Pagulas said, sure, and signed on the dotted line. Who looks like the sucker in this now?
Right. Because now as the new government's getting ready to get sworn in, the new state representatives are getting ready to get sworn in January. Now they start talking about budget conversations, right? Yep. Like that's when those they're not going to have to find money for this stadium in the next budget.
It's not their problem.
The money was already there. The money is already earmarked. It's already been spent. It's already, I mean, as someone who works with government grants and things like that, the money is what the money is. Don't apply for the money and then come to me a year later and say it cost more than I thought it was going to, because the answer is going to be,
that's a you
sorry.
problem. But one of my father's favorite phrases as I was growing up, he'd look at me, he'd let you talk, and then he'd stop you and he'd go, that sounds like a you problem. I don't know why you're telling me about it.
Right.
This all sounds like a you problem.
Yeah.
And so that's the New York State to the Pagulas right now. Hey, buddy, you have a you problem. Don't come talk to me about it. You figure that one out on your own. Now, one of the ways that they planned on doing this was through PSL sales. I want to talk a little bit about that process because it's been interesting to watch play out, to say the least. I think I've said this before, but the concept of letting Jerry Jones's company, Legends in Sports, kind of quarterback this thing, it was going to happen because I think in order to get the pull behind the scenes required to make all of this happen, Terry Pegula probably needed the authority of a Jerry Jones. And also to get in the door as an NFL owner, you probably have to have because you get voted in. Not everybody can buy their way in.
Right.
So even if Trump had tried to buy the Bills, there was no guarantee that the other owners would ratify him in as the owner if there was other options.
Well, that supposedly is the issue with why Bezos wasn't able to buy the Commanders.
Yeah.
Right. There was the issue was he wasn't going to have the votes.
Yeah. So it wouldn't shock me if, all things being told honestly, Terry Pegula is probably in the back pocket of Jerry Jones in some way, shape, or form because he has Jerry to thank for helping him get into the NFL. Jerry Jones doesn't do anything without a cost. No. There's always a price for these things. And so it's not shocking that Delaware North lost the food and beverage contract to Legends Sports and Entertainment. The PSL process got handed over to Legends and Sports. And the problem is that the PSL piece of it, we've watched this company botch this rollout before. The Chargers, guys, if you want to go back and look it up, you can fact check me on this, but the Chargers rollout, they basically told Stan Kroenke and the NFL that they were confident they could generate about $300 to $400 million in PSL sales. Does that sound familiar with something that they told the NFL the Bills could do? By the time all was said and done, in the first year, they'd only generated about $120 million worth of PSL sales, and they ended up having to completely change the PSL model because the rollout went so poorly, which speaks to them not evaluating the market properly. Now we're looking at how the rollout has taken place here and how PSL sales have gone here for the Buffalo Bills. I think it's been much slower than most people gave it credit for. Is that a fair assessment of things from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, even what they told us it was going to be, right? Like I remember getting the phone call from my rep and it was, we'll talk to you in Q1 heading into Q3, right? Mm-hmm. And you and I are in, I guess, what amounts to the cheap seats, right? Like we're in the rock pile, what used to be, and they're nowhere close. Like they're nowhere close to our seats. And
what's interesting is, guys, so there's Facebook groups out there. There's one in particular that exists, and it's also, I want to preface this by saying this. I'm pulling out my phone so I can look at some of these posts because I want to read some of this stuff to you that I've earmarked. But it's called the Buffalo Bills New Stadium Season Ticket Holder Discussion Board. There's 11,000 members in this Facebook group, but it's Facebook, which kind of like, you know how you almost have to, like, when you, depending on whether you're reading Fox News or CNN, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, given the audience and the lean and the narrative. This is all taking place on Facebook. So it tells you kind of the individuals who you're hearing from. Like 7 hours ago, someone puts in, this page is exhausting. Thank you up front to anyone who has posted info that's actually useful. Seat location, PSL costs, etc. Everything else here is irrelevant. Nobody cares about your seats in the current stadium, your seniority, or the entitlement you think you deserve because of it. If you didn't choose to purchase tickets and or why, your opinion on whether the stadium should be a dome or any of the other mindless opinions that make up 90% of the content here. Boo. If you bought seats, congratulations. I'll see you there. If you didn't, no one cares and I won't see you. The team and their proxies for this project did research, much of which we participated in. Whether it's good or bad, there's nothing we can do about it.
I mean, the proverbial die has been cast when it comes to
this
the
guy,
PSLs,
Edward
right?
Carney rules.
Yeah.
I like this dude. But so what you look at is some of the information that's come out about this process. And it's been a long, cumbersome process. Some of it is just fans complaining. Some of it is fans feeling like they've gotten no representation, feeling like they're, what's the best way to frame this? Feeling like their seniority wasn't taken into account, or that they didn't get their due because of the amount of time they've spent as ticket holders. And some of that, to the Edwards point, irrelevant, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Whether it's right or wrong.
It was never going to come down to that. It was never going to be, it was always going to be corporate first, big money first, as little as big money as there is in Buffalo. Yeah. Right? Like, you could watch any of these stadiums that have opened over the last 15 years, and we did the breakdown in the previous shows, but it was always going to come down to supply and demand.
Yeah.
If you got the money, we're going to take your money. If you don't have the money, sorry that you've been with us for the last 40, 50, whatever years, but it is what it is. Like,
sure.
You don't get, like, this isn't a mortgage, right? You can't buy points with your seniority on this. So
it was like when we all got laid off at Sumitomo, like the guys that have been there 30 years. Sorry, you no longer work here.
But what about all the years I've put in?
Yeah.
It's like, no.
We don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Sorry, the thing happened.
Yeah.
That's good for you.
At the end of the day, we're all the same.
Does the number 30, it probably makes you feel good, but it doesn't mean anything. Now, here is a dynamic. There are a couple dynamics that I've already identified that kind of underscore that this Legends in Sports group may have made some mistakes along the way that are actively bogging this process down. Because if you remember when it rolled out, they were supposed to give 3 years. The idea was you were going to have 3 years interest free to finance your PSL. And it was going to coincide with, as long as it was paid off by the day the doors opened, didn't matter what the PSL cost, you were going to have that 3 years. Because I think at the onset of this, they really thought they could get through it all in like 10 months.
Yeah.
This is a post from a club seat member, CC Ann.
No, not Mark Smith.
Nope. Well, so listen to this. I had my experience back in October. I said no because the seats were almost double the cost and my PSL was going to be $8,000. My rep has been calling and texting me with different options at random times over the last few months. I was invited to go into a bar at the stadium before the game on Sunday to discuss other options. Someone tell me how they figure sales are going great. It's not the impression that I'm getting based on my rep's sales tactics. We know someone who's been given an invitation to go hear a pitch at the bar because they were in the club section.
Was this at Longneckers?
No, because they might have gone if it was. It's the concept that this is starting to feel like, for all the, like, what did they say a month or so ago? That they had sold about 5,200 PSLs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Out of the 66,000
Yeah.
that exist. And the fact that they're already circling back to people who didn't buy into the club to kind of reassess, that tells you that it can't be going well.
Well, but I mean, I would say by all accounts, it sounds like it's going as exactly as they said it was going to go, right? For those who say no, you will go to the back of the line in the next section, right? Mm-hmm. So if I go from 8,000, by all accounts, it went to 6,000. That would predicate another phone call, right? We've worked through everybody at 6,000. Those who passed at 8, phone call. We're at the 5s. Those who have passed, phone call, right? So to me, it depends on how you want to spin this. Now, are ticket sales going as fast as they thought they would go? No. But are ticket sales going as fast as you and I thought they would go? Yeah, about, right?
Maybe.
Like, about as many people have passed on the $20,000, the $10,000, the $8,000 as we thought was going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. There were people that were vocal about, I'm not paying a PSL. There were people that were vocal about, this is what I can afford. Like, and not only is it the PSL, but then it's also, from what it sounds like, about a 40% bump in your season ticket cost, right? So people are now starting to do the math on it, where it's like, well, you know, if my seat prices are going to go up 40% per season, now my PSL number may change in my head if I've got to have it paid off by June 26th. So I don't know that it's I don't know that any of this is a surprise. And I don't know that anyone that's invited to these, because these conversations very well could be, I don't want it at 8. Well, what do you want it at? Well, just call me, put me on the list and call me the next time. These bar conversations may just be, we're going to stop calling you. Give us a number, right? Like, we're tired of touching base with you, right? Like, if you go into a car dealership and try to buy a car and the dealership gives you the number and you say, well, that's not it. And they say, well, what's your number? And you go, just call me when you're ready to talk. And they call you 2, 3, 4 times. I mean, just like, in business, right? These organizations that call you, they're eventually just going to say, we're just going to stop. Like, you tell us when you're ready. So this may be a last and final conversation. We don't know until it actually happens.
Which would be interesting when you finally see how this shakes out at the end.
Don't forget, how many season ticket holders do they still have to work through? And then how many are on the wait list because they did that whole thing where it's like, give us a deposit now and you're on the wait list for the new stadium. And then how many people do they think that aren't on the wait list yet that have called and asked about it? So they may be looking at this going like, we've got plenty of a pipeline. We're going to stop wasting our time with these proverbial jamokes that are never going to be okay with the price. Right. And by the time it gets to the price that they're okay with, you're shit out of luck, because the Drews and the Ryans that are ready to pay $2,000-$3,000 for PSLs, like, it's their turn, right?
I'm going to want this bar experience for PSLs. We're going to have to set that up because our season tickets are in Drew's name. From this discussion, I'm going to want that bar interview, and I'm going to pay my portion in nickels. I will go to the bank and get $2,500 in nickels. I will put
make sure you call the bank ahead of time so they can get it for you
in a sleeping bag. And just like sack over. You should
just bring them loose.
$2,500.
Bring them loose in a wheelbarrow.
So you're going to come in like Santa's metrosexual brother and just drop a fat sack on the table and storm out. I want you to put the graphic that I sent you up there so that Ryan can see it and so that our audience watching on YouTube can take a look at it. So one of the benefits of this Facebook group, though, is that there is a member who's been charting and tracking the actual PSL, just based on crowdsourcing data, who's bought, what section are you in. They've been keeping and maintaining a map of the different costs based on where you're going to be in the map that was provided section by section of the new stadium. And I think that this is really helpful to give people who haven't had their meeting yet a fair idea of where they might end up. Because when you take a look at how this goes on down, we've already reached the place, the sticker shock of the $15,000 PSL that made national headlines, that seems to have already worn off for most people. Like, it was shocking for a very short period of time. And now you look at it and they're already talking about $5,000 seats in the lower bowl. And this is just the lower bowl. Now, there are some other annoyances that come along with that. The situation we were talking about earlier today. There's a gentleman in the Facebook group who was complaining that he thought that he would be getting commensurate seats. And this is something for every fan out there who's going to experience this to keep in mind. They thought they were getting commensurate seats actively comparable to what they have right now. The guy goes in for his meeting, gets told his PSLs are going to cost him $6,000. And he goes, oh, okay, so I'll be sitting 2 rows up like I am right now. And they say, oh, no. Your seat had to be moved back. You're technically 2 rows up. You're row 10. In your section, rows 1 through 8 have been cordoned off. They're only available to the family members and friends of players. This is where those people are going to sit. So you are technically 2 rows up. You're just 2 rows behind the friends and family section. And the guy goes, well, wait a minute. That's a downgrade in my watching experience.
Right.
Can I buy one in the next section over? And they said, well, no. There's no mechanism for that because there's other fans who are going to get calls for those seats. You have it's just bad luck. If you want to roll the dice and maybe get seats in another section, you have to actively refuse and go to the back of the line. Now, I could see feeling a certain type of way about something.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Guys, screaming about this on social media, crying about your money, it doesn't matter. But I will say, look at all of the white on this chart. Like, for those of you watching on YouTube, Ryan, take just a stab. I'm not going to count them, but how many sections do you think have no color to them yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, even to do it by a percentage, right? It's probably 75% of the stadium.
I want to bet that you and I won't even get a stadium experience. A part of me believes that what they're going to do is, like you said, you use the term jamokes. They're going to go, listen, you cheap jamokes. Here's an invoice. We're not going to sell you on the niceties here because we don't have time for this. Here's what you owe. Do you want it or not? Because these seats are cheap enough that someone else will take them.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, you know what they'll do to pressure you into doing that? Hey, we've still got all this overflow from all these other sections who said no. So the second you say no, that guy's going to take your seat.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, you know, when you look at the maps that are up, you know, the map that Chris has up, and then I pulled up the Atlanta Falcons map from when they opened. Mm-hmm. It's about what you would expect in terms of like none of this. And, you know, we would have to probably pull the audio on it. But I think when you and I had this conversation, none of this is a surprise. Like these numbers are right in line with what you would expect the numbers to be, right? $50,000 for the businesses, for the organizations, and for the 0.5% of people that can make that kind of money. Mm-hmm. Tiered down from there, you've got the club seats. The cheapest club seats appear to be what, $8,000, maybe $6,000 if you get into the field level. Those are by all accounts club seats. So you're $6,000 in your cheapest club seats. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
I mean, sounds about right. I mean, if you're talking on the field, like you're the first section on the field between the end zones, right? You're not end zone seats because those are starting to get into the 5,000 and then probably 4,000 as they swing further towards the tunnels. This is about what I thought it was going to be, which puts your nosebleed sections, right? Like your top corners, like those are going to be probably in the $500, $750 range. Mm-hmm. You're going to get the straight end zone seats are probably going to be in the 1,000 range. I've said from day one, when my family asks who have season tickets with us, what do you think our PSLs are going to be? My answer has been, I'm figuring about $1,000 a seat.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're going to wind up being.
I figured about 25 to 28.
Yeah,
even if it's 3, I mean, that's a ballpark.
And here's the thing. Would you pay that if your seats are also undercover?
And this is where you start to get into some of the nuances of the stadium.
Yeah.
Like it really is cool for as many people scoff at it. When you do get to see not just the renderings, but you learn more about the science they're building into this thing to make not only, hey, there's an awning with heaters built into it, but also it's also going to melt the snow and precipitation off the top of it. So they don't have to constantly be doing maintenance on it because we live in an area that'll drop 6 feet. I live 10 minutes from the stadium. It will drop 6 feet of snow at some point in time during that stadium's existence. Yep. It needs to be engineered to withstand that.
Right.
And by all accounts it is, which is really cool.
I mean, how much would you love to go to a game? And Chris, and I know you've been to them too. How much would you love to go to a game and not have to worry about your knees in your mouth because the snow's so deep in front of your seats that, you know, you can't even put your feet on the floor.
Yeah.
Like that to me is worth, you know, whatever they're going to charge for. The field's going to be heated. Like, and it's a grass field. Like there's ways that they're spending this money that make this entirely worthwhile.
But now,
what if you sit next to some jackass that shows up in a snow game, preferably on a Sunday night in Crocs?
I mean, what did Drew say earlier? It sounds like a him problem.
Right? That sounds like a you problem. That sounds like a her problem.
Yeah.
Yes. There was a whole lot of problems. So
I think what this more so is this, the whole reaction, this visceral reaction to what these pricings looks like. I think Bills fans who have those types of tickets, those orange and pink seats, you know, $8,000, $6,000, $10,000 seats, I think they really need to come to grips with the reality with how underpriced these tickets have been
100%.
For NFL season, right? Like those tickets should be going for $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 per game in some of these stadiums.
And so, but to keep this conversation moving and kind of bring it to a conclusion, the reason I started with the whole, you know, the cost of everything rising, this PSL sale is not happening very quickly.
No.
And it was supposed to generate 300 to 400 million. Now, it remains to be seen if they'll hit that target. Legends has been wrong before.
Yeah.
At the same time, this money that they are earning is coming in at a trickle compared to their just ballooning expenses. So what do you do, right? When you've got mounting debt And you've got all of these expenses and then your income streams. I mean, first of all, let's talk about who the Pegula family is. This is a family who famously got all of their PSE, Pegula Sports Entertainment employees together and held a PowerPoint, a big meeting with a PowerPoint presentation. And one of the slides was the Pegula family goals. And they talked about how they weren't giving anybody raises. The budget was what it was, and they had to protect the family lifestyle. It's a direct quote from Kim Pegula. That's a tough thing to swallow, knowing that that's who they are, right? And that they're a little tone deaf in that way. The reality is they're not going to bankrupt themselves for our franchise's sake and for our sake and for the football fans' sake. They're still going to try to live the life of a billionaire, right? Billionaire family.
You can't drill in North Collins?
Well, it's hard to do when your income streams don't line up with that, because right now Pegula owns JKLM Energy, okay, which has a $100 million valuation. It's worth about $100 million. It generates less than that per year, but that's what it's worth in totality. Eastern Resources, a company valued at about $310 million, but again has a market cap of about $125 million.
Yep.
Both of those are a far cry from $1 billion. He also owns Black River Entertainment, which is a country music label. Chris, how does that make you feel about him, knowing he owns an obscure country music label for seemingly no reason?
You know what that tells me? You know what that tells me?
What?
One of the kids or one of the kids' significant others at one point wanted to be a country music singer. And they weren't good enough. So dad just started his own label and he was like, I'll just fucking produce your albums.
I'll make a CD. And then it went poorly. And he's like, well, now no one will buy this.
Well,
thing,
it
so
either went
exists.
poorly or they broke up with the significant other or they just lost interest in it as kids do.
Hey, bro, somebody got dumped and wrote an album.
Or that was like my boyfriend, my fiance is going to be a country music star. Let's start a label, and then he cheats on her and leaves, and then where are they?
And the dog died, and you had to go get your truck back, and that's. I'm not gonna lie, that has the makings of a.
I mean, spoiler alert: Zach Bryan, right? Maybe that's him. Maybe he got famous after he was in bed with the Pegulas, literally.
None of the Pegula's current forays into business have enough in terms of revenue stream to keep them at their flush with cash, enough to have the things that they want to have and also meet their current their growing obligations with the stadium project. So how do you manage all that? What do you do? What is your biggest asset? And how do you turn that into revenue, Ryan? In the words of Real Big Fish, you sell out. Mm-hmm. You sell out, and that's exactly what Terry Pegula did. You see, the NFL changed their policy this past summer. It's been a long-standing rule that only individuals, wealthy individuals, could be part of an NFL ownership group. That's because, like, if you think about what a conglomerate is or what a private equity firm
Private equity is the big thing, yeah.
There is no, there's a CEO usually of a private equity firm, but that CEO doesn't have standalone authority over anything.
No, I mean, the CEO of a private equity firm is typically just going to be there to run the day-to-day, right? The private equity firm is owned by the people who give the money to the organization to run.
And so the problem is that you can't have an entity with no leader be a part of an NFL ownership structure until 2024. When the NFL said, you know what, being the money pig that we are, what if we open the door? What's the worst that could happen if we let a couple private equity firms in? But who's going to do it? Right. Who's going to be the guinea pig to see if this creates problems or not? Here comes Terry, baby.
Yeah.
Terry Pegula stepped up to the plate and sold to an interesting list of individuals. Chris, if you give it a Goog there, just if you Google, I think the term I searched to find the actual photo that you could even include with the YouTube if you wanted to. Buffalo Bills minority owners. And yeah, there's a whole graphic here if you want to take a look at it, but Acrtos Partners, a private equity firm that focuses on the sports industry, is the biggest minority shareholder at 5%. Rob Palumbo, a lady named Sue McCollum, Mike Jew, Teresa Guao, Rob Ward. I'm not going to lie.
You know what those names say?
It's a whole bunch of dorks.
A whole lot of nerds.
Yeah, I would say a whole bunch of dorks. somehow teamed with Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady, which makes him cool.
And Josie Altidore.
And Josie Altidore, who I've heard the name, I just don't know. He's a baseball player, right?
No, he's a soccer player. Josie Altidore was supposed to be America's version of Pele when he was young. He was like the rising star that was going to be change what soccer was. He was supposed to be who Christian Pulisic is, for those who know soccer.
So then he turned out to be that Raiders quarterback that never ate McDonald's.
He brings in all of these people, and in the process, selling 20% of the team generates over $1 billion in just cash in his pocket. Mm-hmm. And what did those minority owners really get? Like, the NFL is...
Well, they get money.
They get money, and they get residual. Like, they get residual income on their initial investment, but this speaks to a long-term play. If you're only buying 5% of an organization, and somehow the 20 of you had to pony up $1 billion, I mean, you're not seeing your return on investment on this for at least 15.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? Like private equity firms, they're strip and sell by nature, right? I mean, the entire purpose of their... It's
not usually long-standing investments.
The entire purpose of their purpose is they invest in an organization that's floundering, they part it out, sell parts and bits and pieces of it, and then they just kind of discard the carcass, right? Like, that's the entire premise of private equity firms, is they make money quick by capitalizing on struggling businesses and owners who need to get out from underneath them. Now, as you know, the big concern was private equity firms getting into the NCAA and getting into colleges. Yes. And there was a whole thing about that. But, you know, getting into private equity into the NFL is really interesting, especially as these teams start to build these stadiums, because where is the quick return if you own an NFL team, right? Like, by all accounts, there's no quick return.
Yep.
And if you're not buying a majority share, because Terry Pegula won't, because Terry Pegula's entire fortune right now is based off of the fact that he owns the Buffalo Bills. Like, what's the end game? Mm-hmm. But the problem that I struggle with, there's got to be an end game, right? Because these private equity firms aren't pumping money into these teams for no reason, and these guys are a lot smarter than most of us are, right?
I know, and it's concerning.
Yeah.
Like, when you think about what private equity is and why they've said no for so long, it's because of this. It's also because of this, not just the leadership thing. It's also this dynamic of, this is usually quick turnaround. I need to make cash fast, and we'll burn bridges if we have to. Yeah. But that's not what the NFL is based on. And if you go down that road, like, we just opened the door to something that we have no idea where this is going to go.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested to know, to your point, what the end game is. And you'd like to believe that you have an owner who's savvy enough to understand the relationships he's getting involved in. But Chris, this is a clip from Terry Pegula's press conference, or at least his spot that he did with NFL Network, where he talked to Ian Rappaport about, and what I forget the woman's name, Chris.
It's not relevant.
About his, newfound cash acquisition.
I can say that, the association with Acrtos is going to be a nice thing for us, because they've got so much involvement in sports around the world and in multiple sports. And one of the things that I wanted to accomplish when I started down this journey was I wanted to have partners that I could get along with. And Doc O'Connor and Ian Charles and Jordan Solomon, they're good guys, and we had a lot of fun last night. So we're going to get along well with them. Our other limiteds are, they've been Bills fans longer than I have. They grew up, several of them, in the Buffalo area, and they love the Bills from when they were small children, and I thought that was pretty cool. They're now successful living in other areas, but love the Bills, and I think that's great. And they're all good people to get along with, and fun to be with. So,
Chris, I hear this. Ryan, you and I sat here on this podcast a few months ago, whenever it was, and lamented the fact that Terry Pegula doesn't speak publicly about the Buffalo Bills. That was fucking painful to listen to. And I'm sorry, but I don't know if that's the guy who should be talking to private equity firms about, I just want good guys. What are the qualifications to be part of this group? Other like they're the same as being part of my softball team. You just have to be a good guy, apparently. And that's the way he comes across. And I take two things away from this, Chris, as we wrap the show. I have buyer's remorse about ever demanding Terry Pegula speak publicly about the Buffalo Bills. Yeah. I don't want to hear him talk publicly again. Go put Peter Gwaley out there, Gooley, whatever, however the fuck you say it. Get him out there and let him be the mouthpiece, because I don't need Terry Pegula talking to me. I can now see why Kim was the face of things.
Yeah,
that guy can't speak, and that's not like, I don't mean that in like a mush mouth way. I mean it in just he's not articulate enough for this, and I also mean that I'm concerned. Because his explanation of, well, we wanted good guys who we could get along with. That scares the hell out of me. That can't be the only qualification. You have to have an end game, right? Or you become a rube who gets taken advantage of by a bunch of corporate interests.
Or you become a guy who hires a soccer coach to coach an NHL team.
Or you end
he
up
was in hockey to begin with.
And Chris, that speech he gave the hockey team the other day, like they get pumped out 6-1. Immediately afterwards, as Ryan pointed out as we were talking off air, he's clearly a great motivational speaker. I will say that this is all very concerning to me. Like, good, they're going to be able to keep up their lifestyle and keep up with the Bills. It is concerning that they're having these massive cost overruns and selling off chunks of the team is the only way to come up with the cash for it. I hope
he was the guy that when he bought the team said, we'll just drill another hole, right? Or drill another
and then that
well.
hasn't come to fruition.
He doesn't have the money to drill a well if you look at the valuations of the organizations that would be doing it.
So I really, really, truly hope that somewhere along the line, this doesn't blow up in our face, that we are the NFL's guinea pig as to, hey, will private equity actually ruin the NFL? Who knows? That's another topic for another financial podcast down the road. But for tonight, we got to get the hell out of here. I'm Drew Gear. That's Chris Kruger. That's Ryan Lasel. And this has been your Buffalo Bills financial update.